So avoiding new relationships is early sobriety is something that I would recommend. It's recommended not to date for your first year. And I found that to be really helpful for me. I didn't date for my first year. I mean, what I focused on is I focused on building real human connections with both men and women. And I learned how to be vulnerable and honest. Hello, my friend, and welcome to another episode of I Love Being Sober, sponsored by 𝐾𝐨𝐽𝐿 Recovery, Arizona's preferred sober living option to help AA newcomers stay sober during their first year in the program. If that's you or someone you know, then you're in the right place, because my name is Tim Westbrook, and I'm the CEO and founder of 𝐾𝐨𝐿 Recovery, here in the always sunny and always sober Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have helped thousands of people to stop their suffering and continue on their path to recovery. Let's get clear on one thing. We believe that a relapse or a slip is not a part of recovery. And that's exactly why this podcast is dedicated to you or any loved one you know in their first year of striving to live a clean and sober life. The purpose of this podcast is to come clean with all of the misinformation that's out there about recovery, addiction treatment, mental illness, and the strategies to stay sober in general. So if you believe you're in the right place, or if you know someone who is struggling with addiction, it's my privilege to share this podcast with you. Now, I have no idea if you and I have ever met, but what I do know is that AA saved my life. And I also know that to find long-term recovery and live happy, joyous, and free, it is not just about stopping your drinking, drugging, gambling, sexual indiscretions, or any other addiction you may have struggled with or suffered from. Because at 𝐾𝐨𝐿 Recovery, we believe that sobriety can and should be fun. And look, any recovery process is not easy. It is challenging, it can sometimes be annoying, and for the most of us, it is often difficult to stay on the path. But here's the good news. The self-awareness you gain from listening to this podcast, especially if you are in your first year of recovery, will help you make better choices, which will ultimately lead you to live in a kick-ass sober life. Visit 𝐾𝐨𝐿Recovery.com to learn more about our treatment strategies for alcoholism, drug addiction, or mental illness. And we even offer recovery coaching so that you can enjoy the freedom and happiness you've always searched for. Welcome to the 74th episode of I Love Being Sober, the show devoted to people in their first year of sobriety. If you are pressed for time, listen at 1.5 times speed and you will still get all of the content from this episode. No need to take notes because I've paid a professional note taker to do that for you. The notes to this and other episodes are available when you look for them at ilovebeingsober.com. Please do that when you're done listening to this episode. You'll be glad you did, and that's my personal pledge to you for listening in its entirety. Now, although your first year in sobriety is central to our discussions, you and I will also explore other fascinating and important topics such as health and fitness, self-care, food and nutrition, breathwork, and biohacking, just to name a few. All of these things are your gateway to living a kick-ass sober life, which is our mantra at 𝐾𝐨𝐿 Recovery. In this episode number 74, you'll learn about the third secret, which I believe is critical to avoiding a relapse. You'll discover what, which is that developing a positive support network is imperative if you want to avoid a slip, along with why it's so important if you want to avoid that relapse. I will share my experience and how I developed a positive support network. And based upon that information, you'll be able to figure out how it works for you. So lean in and listen carefully, because this episode could have a significant impact on how you can make it to a year and much closer to living a kick-ass sober life. Also, this podcast is similar to an AA meeting in that everyone here is either clean and sober, struggling, thinking about getting clean and sober, or whatever it may be. And on that note, if you learn anything or if you hear anything that resonates with you throughout this episode, please let us know in the comment section of YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. What you share might resonate with someone else and could possibly save them from a slip or maybe even save their life. So don't be shy. Be sure to share what resonates with you in the comment section. You must develop a positive support network if you want a chance at getting this thing. Remember, if you're in your first year, the chances that you make it to a year are slim, very slim, like less than 10%. You must surround yourself with people that you want to be like, people that have what you want, people that have been down the same path. You've never, ever gotten clean and sober, which is why you're listening to this episode. Enlist your friends, family members, addiction professionals, people in support groups, people in fitness groups, etc. These are the people that will guide you, support you, love you, give you direction, give you good suggestions, be honest with you, and help provide the accountability, community, and support that is necessary to achieving long-term sobriety. Be open and honest with your network. Tell them what you're doing. Get integrated into a fellowship. How did I do it? How did I develop my positive support network? I did a couple of things. First, I got a sponsor and I followed his suggestions, which meant I called him every single day. I went to meetings. I went to 90 meetings in 90 days. Actually, I probably went to 1 or 2 meetings a day for my first couple of years. But as far as my sponsor goes, went to the same meetings as he went to. I went to the meeting before the meeting. I went to breakfast after the meeting. I can remember like the Saturday morning. There was a Saturday morning meeting at 7 a.m. I went to that meeting, lots of laughter, lots of joy, lots of connection. And then we would all go out to breakfast after. And that was just a way for me to stay connected to my sponsor and stay connected to other people in the program. I also met with my sponsor on a weekly basis in person. Typically, we did step work and until I was all the way through the steps. I also called 3 guys per day, 3 people per day, just to stay connected to people that were in recovery, people that were in the 12-step program. I showed up to meetings early. I stayed late. I participated while I was at meetings. I stayed present. I didn't get up and go to the bathroom 3 times during the meeting. I was involved. I made announcements. I did service work. I also saw a therapist on a weekly basis. I let everyone know in my network that I'm clean and sober. And I wasn't advertising or promoting AA, but I just wanted to make sure that people knew what I was doing with my life, and that them having awareness just was, I found, a positive thing. Me letting other people know was a positive thing. Service work, as I kind of mentioned, I did lots of service work, whether it was sharing at a meeting, whether it was making coffee, whether it was chairing a meeting, whether it was cleaning up the room after the meeting. I was also asked by another friend of mine in AA. He was on the chairman of the board of directors of Crossroads, which is a nonprofit here in Arizona. He asked me to be on the board of directors. It was a 501c3. So that was a great service commitment for me. I remember there was a guy his name was Kyle, and he was struggling. He was in the hospital. He got into a major car accident, and I brought a meeting to him every single week. And he ended up moving. He used to be close to my house, and then he ended up moving to like 30 minutes away. And I would round a bunch of people up, and that was my service work. I'd round a bunch of people up, and I'd go see him every single week. Even today, here I am. I'm over 10 years sober at the time of this recording. I'm over 11 years. There's a guy that I sponsor. He's at the Salvation Army, and I go down and I see him on a weekly basis. And that's my way of being of service and staying connected. And that keeps me connected to the right people. So what did I not do? There are a lot of things that I didn't do. I can tell you one thing. You know what? I'm going to talk about what I didn't do later. So avoiding new relationships early sobriety is something that I would recommend. It's recommended not to date for your first year. And I found that to be really helpful for me. I didn't date for my first year. I mean, what I focused on building real human connections with both men and women. And I learned how to be vulnerable and honest. Before I got clean and sober, I did not know how to be vulnerable and honest. I didn't know how to connect with another person below the surface. It was all very much on the surface. And I didn't know how to have an intimate relationship. I knew nothing about intimacy. I used to think that intimacy meant having sex. And that's not the case. Sexual intimacy is a type of intimacy, but it's not the only type of intimacy. I think there's like 4 different types of intimacy, but there's a really good definition of intimacy that I learned from Joe Polish. Intimacy is a mutual exploration of a shared safe place. Abuse is anything that takes away the safe place, and addictions are what we do to make ourselves feel good when we don't have a safe place. So this definition was shared with him over a decade ago in the rooms of Sex Addicts Anonymous. And I think it's a great definition, especially for someone that's in recovery or an addict or an alcoholic that's in recovery. Intimacy builds over time. As you connect with someone, you grow to care about each other. You feel more and more comfortable during your time together. The first intimate relationship I ever had with another man was with my sponsor. And that was a beautiful thing. I mean, again, it's not sexual intimacy, it's intimacy. It's a shared safe place for us to get vulnerable and honest. I learned how to have intimate relationships through the 12-step program. That's how I learned. And really getting to know people below the surface is not only much more satisfying, but once you learn how to connect, if you're like me, you don't know how to connect. And most alcoholics and drug addicts that are in the addiction, it's very much on the surface. Once you learn how to connect, you'll attract a different type of person into your life. You will attract people that are honest, people you can trust, people that you can have a shared safe place with. You should have that shared safe place with everyone in your positive support network. You're putting yourself at risk if you're spending time with anyone you don't have a shared safe place with. Your addiction is the solution and the path of least resistance. The path to feel good if you're getting squirrely is to reach out to your drink or drug of choice. So you want to do everything you can to feel safe and to not get squirrely. And being around people in your positive support network is a path to avoid that slip, avoid that relapse. And remember, you're the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. So as you're becoming a different person, you're attracting different people into your network. And you also want to be selective in who it is you let into your network. You'll want to spend more time with more people that you want to spend time with. People that have that positive influence, people that are conducive to your recovery, conducive to your sobriety. Spend more time with people that you can have the mutual exploration of a shared safe place with. These are the things that will set you up to successfully make it to a year without slipping. So here's a quick review about the insights you and I both rediscovered in this 74th episode of I Love Being Sober. Developing a positive support network is key to avoiding a relapse. And I also went over why it's so important in this episode. I also shared my experience with how I developed my positive support network. And based upon everything you've heard here, you can figure out how it works for you. And remember, these insights will only work for you if you work them. So please make sure you apply what you've learned in this episode of I Love Being Sober, because if you do, you will be on your way to living a kick-ass sober life. And I think you'll agree that's exciting to think about. And speaking of reviews, before we end this episode, I want you to go to the reviews section on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this and type in one thing that resonated with you. Every comment counts, and what you share could resonate with someone else that is struggling and potentially save their life. You will also be asked to rate this episode. I hope I've earned 5 stars from you. So go ahead and share the one thing that resonated with you in the reviews section where you're listening to this podcast. It'll take just 3 minutes out of your day, but what you share could save someone's life. Okay, that does it for this week. I'm Tim Westbrook, and I hope that our paths cross again next week for I Love Being Sober, the show devoted to people in their first year of sobriety. Sound like a plan? And do whatever it takes to join me for episode number 75, because we're going to talk about secret number 4, staying in therapy and continuing with your recommended treatment plan. I encourage you to invite a friend, a loved one, or a sponsee to listen to I Love Being Sober. I can't wait to connect with you then. It will be an insightful episode, so I really want you to join us with your loved one.